Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. I'm here with Greg Palast. Everybody knows who he is. He's the guy that's doing that big fight in Georgia right now. He's suing the state. Greg Palast, talk to me about what's going on in Georgia right now. Give us an update. I know there's a hell of a lot going on out there.
Okay, yes. Back in September, I did an investigation with my team. You know, I usually work for media outlets like the Election Crimes Bulletin, which you have on Pacifica Network, Democracy Now!, Guardian, etc., Rolling Stone. But this time I decided I would work with the voting rights groups. The ACLU issued a report of mine saying that 198,351 voters were illegally purged, that is, got canceled off the voter rolls of Georgia before the general election. This is a story that the big media didn't cover. Now, supposedly Biden won squeaked by just 12,000 votes. But you have to understand, they shoplifted a couple 100,000 votes from Biden and the Democrats. That should have been over with. But what happened was we went into now a Senate runoff, and for those who don't know, if whoever wins the 2 Senate seats, which are up for grabs in a runoff, which will be decided January 5, though early voting has started, whoever wins that will control the United States Senate. So if the Republicans win, Mitch McConnell has been reelected. If the Democrats win, he's going to be, I guess, getting some of that COVID unemployment payout. So a lot is at stake. So as a result, they've cranked up the Jim Crow. They've cranked up the attack on voters of color. Now they got to get a lot of voters of color because as of this year, according to the census, Georgia's become a white minority state. A lot of that is because of a massive increase in the Hispanic and Asian American population of voters. So they're going after, by the way, not just black folk. It's not just Jim Crow. It's Kim Crow going after, Asian Americans, and Jose Crow after the Hispanic vote. Now, how are they doing this? Well, I just told you that they're removing 200,000 people, but there's other tricks, and I'll get into the suit in a minute, but I want to tell you a couple of other tricks. By the way, if you're wondering, I just got back from Atlanta from investigating, working in Georgia, coming home for the holidays. I'll be back on the ground there for the election. Now, I was in Cobb County. Now, where's Cobb County? It extends out from Atlanta. And understand, Cobb County is considered GOP territory. They elected Newt Gingrich several times. They were stunned, the Republicans that control the county, when Joe Biden won Cobb. Mm-hmm. So they went into full panic. So what did they do? One of the reasons Biden won is that they had massive turnout in early voting. A record turnout, people, but not just mailing in their ballots, because the African-American voting rights group said mailing in your ballot is dangerous stuff. You're handing someone who doesn't want your vote to count every excuse to knock off your ballot. Like you don't have a return address, you leave off a middle initial on your return address, that type of thing, you will lose your vote. So people stayed in line to vote, and that's how Biden won Cobb County. So what did they do? They had 11 early voting stations in Cobb, and they simply closed the 6 that were in African-American neighborhoods. It's just that raw. They closed 6 voting stations in black neighborhoods and left open the 5 in the white neighborhoods. But I got to tell you, I was in Cobb, so the black population just got in buses and cars and anything that moves, scooters, you name it, bicycles. I kid you not.
They were voting.
They were moving into those white areas and voting. And I got to say, and by the way, the turnout every single day, weekday, weekend, doesn't matter. You're seeing massive, massive, massive lines. In the general election, the turnout was a record. And now in the runoffs, which usually have a big drop off,
right?
In the runoffs, the turnout is even higher than in the general election. People know that everything is at stake. And by the way, that's not just the Democrats coming out. It is the white evangelicals are voting like their lives depend on it. So both sides are jamming the polls. But like I say, they're playing these tricks. They're closing the early polling stations. Crazy stuff. Like one of the other things that the Palast investigative team uncovered was what we call no car, no vote. They've passed a sneaky little rule, which we caught, that said if you don't have a car registered in Georgia, your voter register, if you can't register to vote in Georgia, they can challenge your voter registration. And I say, wait a minute, you have to buy a car to vote in Georgia?
Poll tax?
Not exactly. And yeah, it would be the most expensive, you're right, Bert, it'd be the most expensive poll tax in American history, and poll taxes are unconstitutional. So what are they doing? What they're saying is, if you don't have a car registered, well, you might not actually live here. You might be faking it. Well, that's cute. Who doesn't have a car but is a citizen? One, low-income people who can't afford a car. If you're poor and you can't afford a car, okay, you don't have a car registered. Does that mean you can't vote? The other is if you are living in an urban area and use the public transportation. And once again, the Atlanta voters are Democrats, white, black, whatever. And finally, I know that this was almost knocked out a vote of a young woman I know who lives in Savannah, who's a student, my daughter, who had a hell of a time voting. Her friends, many of her student friends, couldn't vote because they didn't go through the process that she did. You have to fight. They'll challenge your vote. Then you got to go to a hearing. You have to go to a hearing and fight to get your vote back and prove that you're a resident. Now, here's the thing. If you get challenged because you registered December, by the re-registration date of December 7th, you get challenged. You are not going to get that hearing until after this election is over. That's the trick. They say, oh, well, we'll give you your vote back. You just have to show up at a hearing. So first of all, who's going to show up go through a whole court process for their vote? Even if you do, it's too late. This is the game that's being paid. And by the way, how many voters are being challenged? 300,000. 300,000.
Wow. Now, is this an active challenge going on right now?
Yes. And so what's happening is the ones that these cracker commissioners are doing, those are the most devastating because those are going to be holding off voters till after the election. But there's also a private organization called True the Vote. And True the Vote they're at the core of the challenge of 300,000 new registrants. Their view, now I rarely use this term, but they truly are a racist organization. They've been specializing in knocking off especially voters of color. They're very active in Texas, in Arizona, and now they're literally targeted 300,000 voters and saying, don't let them vote. And this is the game that's being played. Now, like I say, so now the new thing is the filing of a lawsuit to get back. Remember, I said that they removed 200,000 voters illegally, according to the ACLU report that I issued. So picking up my report, Black Voters Matter, which is founded by Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright, Black Voters Matter, and Operation Rainbow Push, the Reverend Jackson's organization, and you've got other groups, and out of Texas, Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, which is based in Texas. They joined the suit, especially to protect Hispanic voters in Georgia, a big new group. And so we had, by the way, a one-day trial. We had the best voting rights lawyers in America, including, this will be interesting, Fred Gray. Now, Fred Gray, for those who know civil rights history, may recognize that name. He was Rosa Parks's lawyer in 1954 and Martin Luther King's first lawyer. During our trial, he was a lawyer, one of our chief lawyers. He turned 90 during the trial. So, I mean, he's been working. By the way,
right.
Imagine, it's like you feel like, well, what have I done with my life? When you watch him, we had great lawyers. And so we're going to have the trial continues. The problem is that we didn't win an injunction to get everyone just simply stuck. We said, look, this is clearly a list of people wrongly removed. Put them back on. We can't wait for a full trial. They got to be back on now for this election. And the judge said, yeah, the list looks pretty like there's real problems with this purge list. He ordered the state to sit down with us and try to work it out. They've been, they've disappeared. We're trying to chase them around. Then he said, look, they didn't have enough legal notice to give you an injunction. So we decided, okay, we'll give you new notice. So we issued a press release. We're having a press conference. We wrote up a new suit, press conference. We notified the Secretary of State. We got in front of the state capitol, all these big shot lawyers, and then all the TV cameras, NBC, CNN, etc. And we march up the Capitol steps and into the governor's office and past the governor's office to the Secretary of State. And the door is locked. They locked the doors. This is a state office. They locked the doors. They turned off the lights. And here's the cameras rolling. It was like a comedy, So then they put a little tag on the door with a phone number. And of course, it went straight to voicemail. So then we said, I'll tell you what. Latasha Brown from Black Voters Matter said, you know what? They have another office in another building. Let's go see if maybe that's where they're hiding out. So we go over there, all the lawyers, cameras, and they're kind of hiding behind the door was the director of elections. So we said, bang, we slapped him with the new lawsuit. And then Latasha Brown starts saying, when are we meeting? The judge wants you to meet with us. When are we meeting? We'll get around to. He said, look, the election's in 2 weeks. Don't play games. When are we meeting? So they gave us a runaround. Then I took over and I said, look, Mrs. I have a Mr. Miguel Diaz. I have a Mr. Watson. I have a Mrs. Jordan. These are people you said moved who never moved. You're going to put them back on the voter rolls? Here's 3 names. He says, well, look at the evidence. I said, no. You don't have evidence that they moved. I have them on videotape in their homes saying, right, I'm still here. Now, okay, you look at the videotape. If you look at the videotape and you look at the records, will you agree that they haven't moved and you'll let them vote? So he still wouldn't agree. I said, and by the way, I got a list of 198,000 more people you could put right back on. No, so I said, I'll tell you what. And then I confronted him about something else. Now, I said their claim is that these voters moved out of Georgia. Now, Alberto, you can't vote in Georgia if you don't live in Georgia.
Right.
It's against the law. So were there 198,000 illegal voters? Well, let me tell you, before you remove someone from the voter rolls on grounds that you think that they moved, you have to do something that makes complete sense. Call the post office. You have to contact the post office. Now, here's the deal. God, I sound like Biden. I'm saying, here's the deal.
Been around it too long.
Yeah. So if you're going to remove someone from moving, you have to check with the post office. It's not only common sense to check with the post office, it's the federal law. It says right in the federal law, you have to check with the post office. By the way you do that, you hire a contractor who has the right to go into the post office computers.
Right.
Because the post office already doesn't have enough time to do anything.
Right.
So you hire these officially licensed post office representatives, companies, and we did. In fact, the Palast Investigative Fund hired 3 of them, 3 of these firms, just to make sure that we got it right. And they all came back with the same exact answer: 198,000 people wrongly removed. Same answer. The state never checked with the post office, but they lied to the court. They lied to the court. You think that your public officials don't lie to the courts, don't perjure themselves? Well, they do. They straight up lied to the court and said they checked with the post office, even though, in fact, they specifically said that they used a licensee, which you must designate by federal law. You have to say use a licensee. They said they used a company called Anchor. So we called Anchor and they said, no, we didn't work for these guys. We work for you. We hired them. They didn't. And so they lied. This is what these guys do. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. The Democratic Party always tells me, they always get very upset when I talk about vote suppression. They say, oh, that'll stop people from voting. Well, Stacey Abrams proved them wrong. She runs an organization called Fair Fight Georgia. She's been screaming with me about voter suppression in Georgia, and that has increased the turnout. The reason is that what we find is that people get angry that someone's
when you try to take away their vote.
So you know what? And when someone's trying to take something away from you, it's valuable. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother stealing it.
Now, Greg, this is obvious. This is quite obvious. And we have a very important election that is not only Georgia based, it's nationally, it has national consequences.
Yeah.
what's the probability that you get the vote for those 198,000 people who were illegally removed before January 5th?
Well, as the judge was asking us actually about this, about how we were doing independently of the court. And it's one of the issues, how many we've already gotten back on. We've run a big campaign. In fact, we have a 20-foot high by 40-foot wide giant electronic billboard over Atlanta. Before the final registration day, we had Rosario Dawson giving messages so that people would look up and see Rosario Dawson. Of course, that caught their eye. Then it says, check your registration. So we think we did Black Voters Matter, sent out 98,000 postcards. SV Rep, the Hispanic organization, was contacting people. We also ran several PSAs in Spanish.
So they re-registered.
So we re-registered.
How many did you get back?
So we believe that we got about 20-some thousand back, maybe 30,000, which is a lot, but it ain't enough. And here's the problem, Egberto. When you've been removed from the voter rolls, you don't know it until you show up.
Right.
And so people show up and they lose their vote. They get thrown out. Or, and this is a very sad thing. I talked to one woman in Stone Mountain, an African-American family, Stone Mountain, and she was voting. She was going back to vote under this gigantic monument to the Confederacy.
I've been there, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of carved into the mountain. So, but now this big African-American community has just moved in, middle class, and they're all voting. And she was handed a provision. She said, well, I didn't have a problem. I just had to fill out a provisional ballot.
Not counted.
And then I looked at her and she said, they're not counting it, are they? I said, no. I said, because if you're not on the voter rolls, are you ready for this weird one? Federal law requires that they give you a provisional ballot, one of those yellow things that you fill out and fill out the envelope and all that. So federal law says if there's a problem with your voting, you must get a provisional ballot. But Georgia law says that ballot can't count because it doesn't matter why you've been removed. If you're not on the voter rolls, your vote can't count no matter what. So you fill out this form, and that's really bad because you think you voted and you haven't, and then you don't re-register. So we've got this problem of trying to reach people to say, re-register. But now we've lost the registration deadline. That was December 7th. We got as many back as we could. And by the way, if you're listening in Texas, I'm going to tell you what I tell everyone. And Texas is real bad on this. Check your registration a month, 2 months before you're about to vote. So every September or every June, if you're going to vote a primary, whatever, always check your registration more than a month in advance, because if you're removed, you can re-register. And I got to tell you, I checked here in California and I was purged from the voter rolls.
That's what you told me last time. Yeah.
And I re-registered online.
Look, Greg, we got to wrap this up. So why don't you give me the outcome that you expect out of Georgia? I want two outcomes. One, what do you think is going to be the result of the election? And well, first, what do you think is going to be the result of you getting enough people re-registered to vote or reincorporated into the voter list? And number two, what's the prospects of winning both of those Senate seats?
Okay, two things. The chance of everyone getting back on the voter rolls, we'll leave it up to the courts. It's going to be a hell of a fight. We don't know, but I do know this, that this is going to be a record turnout, which has never happened for a runoff. This is going to be through the roof. Everyone who can vote will. So that's number one. And we don't know how that's going to come out in terms of who wins. I also know that all the tricks from no car, no vote, closing closing early voting stations in black areas, cutting off early voting on weekends, which is illegal, but most of the counties in Georgia are now doing that because they know that African Americans and Hispanics vote on postal polls Sunday. So they're closing those stations. Raw stuff. So I'll tell you this. If everyone gets to vote, given what happened with Biden, and now it's a bigger turnout, there's no question the Democrats walk away with it.
Good.
However, the Jim Crow factor, the disqualification of ballots, the disqualification of voters is so enormous that could tip it the other way. And again, I'm not telling people how to vote or who should win. I'm just saying I would like to see the voters choose their senators, not Jim Crow.
Well, Greg Palast, investigative journalist, He's been all over the place. The Guardian, Wall Street. He's written for everybody. So, folks, look, keep up the good works. I hope your suit works out perfectly in Georgia, and I hope the outcomes is what we need as a country. Thank you so kindly for having been here with us, Greg.
And if you want to catch the follow-up or watch the films that we're making from Georgia, go to gregpalast.com, gregpalast.com, or they're being issued by at Leo DiCaprio. Go to Leo DiCaprio's Instagram story page, and you'll get some of our stories there too. Very good.
Get to his website, folks, gregpalast.com. Thank you so kindly, Greg. Have a good one.
You got it.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.